didn't she? Yeah,
Mhm.
that was one of the comments too. Yes.
Yeah.
So we don't have Dr. Coleman yet.
Not yet.
Mhm.
She is getting ready for a trip to US. So
Which from Australia is a major undertaking, having just done that myself.
Have you just come back, Deborah?
I came back on one of those days ending in Y, April 3rd, I think. Yeah. Mm. And the trip over was 4.5 days delayed because of a cyclone.
wow.
Oh, Lord. And apart from the actual delay, how long would it, the actual all going well, how long should it have taken?
It never goes well. Usually around 26 hours
Oh my
all
Lord.
together. Yeah.
No. At least in the summer, there's direct Air Canada flights from Dublin to Vancouver. 9 hours straight, one flight. So that's
Oh,
great.
yeah. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. Our direct flight Vancouver to Brisbane was 15 hours.
I would just be freaked out flying over water for so long.
Oh, but they do the safety video, you know.
Oh, well, that makes all the difference. But it's funny when you fly from Ireland to Canada, you actually don't fly over water much. You know, you're going up and you're near
Over the pole.
Iceland and
Greenland.
then
Yeah.
Greenland and way up like that. So you actually don't. I think the biggest amount of water we fly over is Thunder Bay. You know, so yeah.
Okay. Should we start, Crystal, or do you think that we should wait again? A couple of minutes?
It's 2:01 and we got 27 people in the room, so we're probably good to go.
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this webinar on the theme Multimodal and Alternative Dissertation Thesis, Meeting the Need of Our Time. For those who don't know me, I am Simon Sige, Vice Dean in the Faculty of Graduate Study at Athabasca University. I will moderate this webinar with my colleague, Corinne Bose, Professional Development Lead in the Faculty of Graduate Studies. Corinne, do you want to show your face?
I'm here. Welcome, everyone.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. As is the tradition at Athabasca University, I would like to start with land acknowledgement. Athabasca University respectfully acknowledges that we live and work on the traditional lands of the indigenous people, Inuit, First Nation, Métis of Canada. We honor the ancestry, heritage, and gift of the indigenous people and give thanks to them. In response to the Canadian Association for Graduate Study 2018 recommendation for graduate school to expand dissertation policies and allow graduate students to engage in innovative forms of research and to work and communicate both within and beyond the confines of the academy. AU has taken the bold decision to begin accepting multimodal theses and dissertation. These theses may incorporate non-traditional to written document intended for non-academic audience, videos, audios, blueprint, and interactive and digital work. Multimodal dissertation open unlimited possibilities, especially at a time when we are called to open ourselves more to indigenous way of knowing. But they also bring major challenges that our panel of distinguished experts will explore with you this afternoon. Without further ado, I will introduce our panelists by alphabetical order. First, Dr. Rima Al-Tawil. Rima, do you want to show up? Thank you.
I am showing.
Rima is an assistant professor in digital pedagogies at Cape Breton University. She holds a doctorate from AU. Her research focuses on electronic nonverbal cue in online learning. Our second panelist today is Wayne Clark. Wayne is an Inuk from Churchill, Manitoba. He is an assistant professor at the University of Alberta and visiting assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University. His research focuses on Inuit health, indigenous medical education, and clinical trial. I don't know whether Dr. Kate Coleman is here already. I don't see her. Is Dr. Kate already in the room? No. Okay. So let's move to Tom Farrelly. Tom is a researcher and lecturer at Munster Technological University in Ireland. He specializes in digital learning and education. His research focuses on innovative assessment practices and the use of portfolios in higher education and professional development. Next speaker is Dr. Deborah Hover. Is very well known here. So Deborah is now Professor Emerita at Athabasca University. During her active university career spanning over 40 years, she taught at university in Australia, Indonesia, and Canada. Her current research focuses on digital storytelling, e-portfolios, and indigenous research methodology. The next speaker is Margaret Rowley. Margaret is currently a sessional instructor in the School of Nursing at the University of Victoria. She is an AU Doctor of Education in Distance Education Program student. Graduate, excuse me. Sorry, Margaret. And the next speaker is Dr. Lana Ray. Lana is, among others, an associate professor in health discipline and Canada researcher in resurgent methodologies for indigenous health at AU. The last speaker on the list is Laurie Thompson. Laurie is the indigenous educational leader in the Kikino Métis settlement, her home community. She is an AU doctoral student. Her research interests include indigenous education, history, and leadership, instructional design, and educational training and professional development. I see that I have a message from Kate. Just give me 1 minute.
Simone, maybe we can go with the first speaker and then we'll see what happens for next.
Okay. So, okay. Some housekeeping information before we start. The presentation will be recorded. Please keep your mic closed during presentations. We will open the floor for Q&A at the end of the presentations. Please raise your hand and wait to be asked to contribute. Alternatively, we will also take questions from the chat. Now that the stage is set, I will invite Deborah to start. Dr. Hoven, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Simon. The floor or the room or the screen or... Okay, so I'm going to try and share, but of course things have changed since I've been last here, but that's sort of par for the course. Let me see. This looks like the one. Can you see that? See my screen? See my window?
Yes.
Excellent. Should come into presentation mode shortly. There we go. Okay, so I'll come back to the beginning. So unfortunately, Simon, instead of 4 slides, I've got 5, but that includes this one, okay? So when we're looking at alternate and multimodal dissertations, what are we looking at? Essentially, from my perspective, and that of some of my students and graduates, it's about disrupting patriarchal traditions. Asking questions like, why in the 21st century should we still be constrained by a monograph? What other worldviews than traditional Western should and could be represented in doctoral work? What other modes of dissemination should and could be possible? The importance of moving away from a linear presentation, and what might such dissertations look like? As Simon mentioned, the CAGS project in 2018, how prepared are doctoral grads for work and the associated competencies, and how might this look? And then the Carnegie project on education, which is ongoing, looking at project-based dissertations initiated from grassroots, community-inspired, and oriented towards lifelong learning. And so some of the rationales for looking at and implementing and introducing dissertations that don't look like a linear monograph. The trends and I think, in my own personal opinion, the interdisciplinary necessity for dissertation doctoral work, the need to incorporate and really make the most of human creativity, especially in this day of AI. Looking at the innovative contributions criteria for any kind of master's or doctoral research. There's always that check this box, and in what way. So how can we expand on the traditional notion of innovative, and building also on the makers movement of creating and innovating, and why not make that part of a doctoral work, doctoral research. At Athabasca, of course, open, online, and essentially decolonized, and making doctoral research more accessible to more people. And I think Laurie will be talking more about that later on. So what are some of the student and supervisor characteristics that are essential to this kind of dissertation? Well, flexibility on both parts, creativity on both parts, if not from the supervisor, certainly from complementary committee members. The essential, critical nature of thinking and asking good questions. And I'm sure that some of the other presenters will expand on what good questions can look like. Expecting and fostering good relationships, establishing mutually beneficial relationships, and mutual understanding and accountability. And then we look at some of the challenges. Haha. So I'm sure that Tom will touch on the issue of rigor. What does it look like in a video if the language is more colloquial, or dare we say it includes expletives, for example? What criteria? What should we look at? What should we be looking at in terms of the level of rigor and what kind of rigor and whose rigor we're looking at? The challenge of finding appropriate committee members who are open to or accepting of, or at least interested in finding out more about the approach as well as the content and topic, and similarly with examiners. And then to date, apart from at this institution, I think Kate will mention, talk about this, institutional inertia against change. So what does the world look like moving forward for doctoral dissertations and master's theses? And that's the end of my slides. And I think that oh, hi, Kate, good to see you. And so I'm hoping that other people will take up more of their time, and I want to make a bit more time at the end for questions. So thank you very much, and moving on to the next presenter.
Yeah, thank you very much, Deborah. I think that because Kate just joined, we will probably give the floor to Tom and come back to her, just the time for her to take a brief. Okay, Tom, are you ready?
Oh, I could be sort of, yeah, I was born ready, one of those rubbishy sort of things, but look, oh, I know, I couldn't resist it. Anyway, I'm delighted to be asked here, so I'll just see about the sharing, which is always a bit of fun when we have. You see that okay now?
We see it, Tom, thanks.
Cheers, thank you. So yeah, my name is Tom Farley and I'm based in the southwest of Ireland in Munster Technological University, or MTU. And that's just look at the methodological and theoretical considerations and quality assessment. And I think to be fair, Deborah has done a great job in sort of setting the scene there already there. I think one of those things which really sort of particularly frustrates me, and I've long argued that here we are in the 21st century and we have hitherto unimaginable, unavailable sort of ways of sort of conversing with each other and creating relationships, creating knowledge, creating artifacts. I'm sitting here thousands and thousands of kilometers away, and there's people joining from all over, and we're all able to interact and sort of share our experience with each other. I'm 61. This is the stuff from Star Trek. I couldn't have even imagined this level of sort of Star Trek, Star Wars, whatever it is. We have all of these technologies, and yet here we are. What does a dissertation look like? Your traditional monograph looks very similar to if you had a 16th century leather-bound book in terms of style and presentation. So, as I said, we're faced with this sort of situation there, that we have all of these possibilities, these affordances, and yet we don't really take them up. And as a friend of mine in Dublin City University often says, when you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. And Deborah had sort of alluded to some of those things there, where a lot of the people in senior positions in universities all over the world, they have come from that traditional image there on the right hand side of the page. And therefore, they have a hammer, and that just looks like a nail. And certainly, the digital multimodal route offers far more opportunities for expression and interesting possibilities. As I said, different ways of knowing, different ways of presenting and stuff. Uh, and yet, as I said, we are faced with those issues there. Some of them, as just Deborah has alluded to, institutional, I think, fear, and sometimes they're like that. And in many ways, a safer option for a doctoral journey is to adopt the well-worn monograph approach. As I said, like, I mean, it's a big journey taking on a doctorate anyway. And then, why would you actually set yourself in that position there like that? Because one, could argue then that it presents far more challenges than a traditional monograph. It certainly sets the bar higher in terms of expectation, and providing more room for the doubters and naysayers there like that, where you're trying to sort of, I think you have to work twice as hard to convince people, because this is what academic rigor looks like. It looks like hundreds of pages of paper bound by leather. And I think, as I said, I know I keep going on about when you have a hammer, everything looks like that, but the safe route. And I do want to really applaud, and I do want to acknowledge AU for actually taking the bull by the horns. And I suppose it does show Athabasca. I mean, on this side of the world, we would certainly regard Athabasca as being one of the leading lights in digital and online learning. And I have to acknowledge there that, I mean, I think they've done a great job in sort of providing that space for people to do it. So I'll move to my final slide quickly, but it's the heart of what I've done. There was certainly a framework of questions for traditional doctorates, but using a whole range of sources and my own experience from working with RE portfolios, I constructed my own framework because I think it was about that rigor. So I think, as I said, it was an autoethnography here. So, and I just go through some of these issues, but I think it was important for me that I found that the AU, it certainly provided a starting point, but it didn't provide me with the same framework that I needed to work through. And I'll have to be honest here, this has been the hardest doctoral thesis I've ever examined. I've examined, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, 15 doctoral theses in Britain, in Ireland, and Australia, and now in AU. So I had to construct this and be mindful of all the standards there. So does the work honestly explore the author's personal experience in relation to cultural phenomena? Because we have to do that. Now, you could say, could that have been a traditional monograph? Yes, it could. What then does methodological integrity look like? What does methodological integrity look like for a multimodal e-portfolio? It does look different. How do those tools work? We don't just want more of the same. We want to take it to new dimensions there. Engagement and accessibility, and I drew heavily onto the universal design principles as well there like that. Because, as I said, one of the great things I think of ePortfolio in comparison to a traditional monograph is it does have a lot more affordances in terms of accessibility. You can't deny as well the aesthetic and creative value, and it should look and feel something. I mean, aesthetically, let's be quite honest, your traditional monograph is not the most engaging of artifacts. So does it do? And I think it does provide all of that. The ethical and cultural sensitivity. Once again, you could make an argument, and quite rightly so, that ethics should always be part of any doctoral journey there, and sensitivity. But I think it takes a greater leap, a much greater degree of ethical integrity and cultural sensitivity to produce a multimodal artifact which does those things well. Transformative, does it provoke reflection or inspire change in its audience? Once again, you could say a traditional monograph should be doing that, but I would argue and strongly advocate that the multimodal e-portfolio enables that, and to take people in a way that Margaret's work was with videos, with images, with poetry, with a whole range of things. All of those senses were coming there in a way that I think simply just reading does not engage the senses there like that. An alignment then with digital ethnography. Does it the work critically reflect on how the digital medium shapes its storytelling and analysis? By actually engaging in this, and sorry for the hand movements, but by engaging it just gives us those opportunities. We don't want simply just more of the same. I often sometimes see somebody presenting an academic poster, and all they've done is just taken basically all the text from a written piece and stuck it onto an A0, but they haven't really engaged with the form and the potential that the poster could offer. And the same thing with the multimodal. So I would say, just to quickly sort of pull it together, it's certainly the hardest examination I've ever done. It's the most rewarding piece I've ever done. But as I said, I think we need to construct, if we're going to encourage people to do it, we need to construct robust frameworks that will help those two assessors. One, to make their life easier, and also then, we have a bit of a job convincing people. So I suppose by making everything transparent, it will help ultimately to enhance the status and the acceptance of e-portfolios. So the same thing as Deborah, I'm looking forward to the questions afterwards. So I'll shut up and pass on. Thanks, Simone.
Thank you very much for this thought-provoking presentation. We'll go back now to Kate. Kate, hopefully you have been able to set yourself up now.
Yeah.
Okay.
I had hello, and very early morning from Melbourne. I had one of those moments when daylight savings has happened in the time since talking about this, which means it was an hour earlier. So good morning. I will sit here and sip black coffee next to you. I also think that was like the most perfect switch, because Tom, I think that you actually should have gone before me. And so hopefully I can kind of show why. I will do my own quick, is Teams going to be generous and let me share? Let's go. All right, you are seeing my slides. So I want to quickly take you back to the beginning. Thank you very much for the invitation. I spend a lot of my work time working and thinking through these big ideas, including writing to Pro-Vice Chancellors to get permission to submit theses in alternate formats. It's an ongoing, but I think really important piece of work to do. So thanks very much for the invitation. I've been fighting this fight since I did my own multimodal thesis, which took some time to navigate through the system, not for examination, but just to be able to submit it. So it's been a kind of, maybe we could say, passion project as I think through what it actually means to do research that's authentic for the field that you're working in, that is ethical because it's actually responsive to the field that you're working in, and actually pushing at boundaries and contributing to knowledge, which I think doctoral research is about, as is all graduate research. So hello, I am Kate. I'm an associate professor in the Faculty of Education at the University of Melbourne. And I have been working to think about how I decolonize, and thank you, Deb, for saying that, decolonize graduate research. If we as institutions talk and think about what it means to actually shift away from colonial structures and colonial powers, then continuing to replicate the colonial structures for graduate researchers and not allowing them to actually shift out of them and sense make about what multimodal research is problematic. And it's problematic for us as an institution, a global institution, for academia to not actually think that knowledge needs to move and be responsive, and to quote Donna Haraway, be response-able. So for me, multimodal research, and you've already heard this from two brilliant voices, it's not about alternative or non-traditional. And I think that these things just keep coming up in institutions. You know, there's a way of doing this, therefore. And so if we're going to decolonize, that's the way that only privileges and serves a few. It means that that book that goes up on that shelf is only allowed to be read by the people who know how to read it. And if we are thinking about care, if we're thinking about social justice, compassion, whatever the work is about, and for me, always centered and located around justice, then that's not the way that the thesis that I supervise actually needs to be presented. And I'm always thinking as an artist about who it's for. And if it's just for yourself, then I often just think, go write the book on your own. The publishers will be quite happy for you to write that monograph. But why does the academy have to certify that? And why does that have to be certified by examiners? So I think we actually have an urgent need, and this is an urgent method for engaging multiple ways of knowing. It allows Indigenous, First Nations, peoples, artists, anybody working from the body and working with more than human knowledges to actually be able to demonstrate what it is that they know now. There's a massive ontological and epistemic shift that goes on in graduate research. And if you go in with a question and a model and you do that, does that actually qualify you to be a graduate researcher? In my mind, no. There's a broad way of actually demonstrating knowledge. And the demonstration of knowledge in text, again, is only for a certain amount of people. There's already, at least in my context, a written language that needs to be developed, but there's an academic literacy that needs to be developed. And if that's all we're assessing, then that's problematic to me. So I think multimodal theses allow us to dwell in complexity. They allow us to linger in contradiction and imagination, and it doesn't flatten them. We don't actually have to decide that there's a hierarchy in these things. It lets these things actually just serve in relation to each other. And because they are resistant to extractive knowledge systems, where I think I can, just because I'm doing a doctorate or a master's, just go into a community and ask them what they know about things and take that knowledge away, analyze it, synthesize it, and then somehow only speak it back to examiners, is exactly what colonizing systems do. And so for me, we actually need to resist that space, and we need to think about what it means to attune, thank you, Tom, to ethics and care and place and people, and be responsive to them at all times. So I think that supervision then needs to be relational, and it needs to be imaginative, because there's many ways of knowing, but how do we actually do that inside the institution? So it's non-traditional, but it's urgent. So if we're thinking in these more than human perspectives and ecological entanglements, what do they look like? You know, for me, they are visualizations. They're when I'm working in a broader humanities space or social sciences, but when I'm working in the art space, these are large scale installations. How do I invite people into those environments? I need to actually be responsive to the field. So I need to film them. I need to go in and I need to make sense of what the space looks like. And then I need to invite the examiner into the space. So do I create a world? I've supervised a number of virtual reality graduate research pieces now, not because we were working in virtual reality, but how did we actually world the space that we were working in to allow that contradiction and imagination and polyphonic voices to be present, particularly when you are being ethical and compassionate and responsible to the people that you've worked with. How do you actually enable their voices to exist within the work, and to not, you know, call them a series of names that have nothing to do with the project? There's this hierarchy of knowledge that only enables the person doing the thesis to have power. But for anyone working in disability studies, anyone working in gender and queer studies, anyone working in community, we know that lived experience actually matters in research. And if we then think about what this invitation to the onto-epistemological space is, how we know what we know and counts as knowledge, then what does that look like? It's not, again, thank you, Tom, it's not a container of truth. We need to actually think about what that container is and what that container holds and who that container serves. And for me, it's only served a few. So how do I actually do this? I need to build trust and co-inquiry that I am actually going to shepherd the policy and practice of the institution. And that is not the job of the researcher. For me, supervision means that I am navigating a system, and those systems are multiplicitous. Those systems are more than just my institution, and they include, as Deb said, how do we actually ensure that the examiners and the assessors and the evaluators, if we put all that language together, are responsive to this kind of work? Can they actually engage ontologically with the work? Because I would say that many of them actually can't, because their version is still binary, their version is still hierarchical, and therefore this is seen as less than. And that language I'm actually just not interested in. I think that we have fought hard enough in a decolonial, anti-colonial, anti-racist, post-truth kind of space to go, there is more than one knowledge system. And if we're going to say that there's more than one knowledge system, then we need to have examiners that are robust enough to agree with that and then step in and then work out how we can all supervise. Because as an examiner, every time I read a paper that comes to me, I am responsible to the care and possibility that this work has. So for me, I just have to go back to Duke. I was very lucky to be a part of the Haystack Duke PhD lab as in my own thesis, and it let me wonder with what a thesis could actually be. And so they gave me all the language that I could use as a student to navigate a system, because augmented realities, graphic novels, soundscapes, they all happened at this time between 2011 and 2015. And the dissertation by design approach was recognized by them. So knowledge is situated, networked, and multisensory was literally just the foundation. So the binary split occurred, and we end up in this beautiful transdisciplinary environment where we can have public scholarship. We can actually present work for public good, which I still do believe the institution and the academy is about. And they let us rethink the form and audience. Who's the research for? You know, Kathy Davidson really allowed all of us to push really hard at what we could think our dissertation was going to become rather than what it was being. And that being and becoming has become important for me. So multimodality is not just about using different media. It's a political stance for me, and it's a political stance in my institution that my institution is backing me on right now, because I can go in as an examiner and say, look what these works are doing. Look what the examiner reports are saying. They're coming back with no changes. These are fantastic works. And I'm doing that and making sure that the students themselves, the candidates themselves can actually do that. They're actually ready to say, okay, yeah, near enough is not good enough. The version of, a thesis done is a thesis done. No, it's not. This is a responsible, responsive piece of knowledge that must change the world if we're working in these beautiful ethics and political spaces. So for me, it's a refusal of hierarchy. So how do I work in the institution that is built on hierarchy and only values it? I need to actually be able to be doing the work myself, which is what I do. My work replicates this. My research replicates this, so that I'm not putting a student up on their own. We're all moving together, and I supervise in a group of students so that they themselves are working out how to also orient, because everything about research that they know is hierarchical. It's a container. Everything that we've been enculturated into, even outside the institution, said research is this, and it's not that. And so how do I actually stay keeping them in a space where they can actually wield and be brave enough to do it? And I think that brevity is one of the most important things to actually be able to speak back to the institution around as well. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate, for this call for brevity. We will move to the next presenter or speaker, Lana. The floor is yours.
Bonjour, everyone. Just a minute. I am just going to attempt to bring up my screen now. Can everyone see that okay?
Yes.
Okay. Wonderful. So, Bonjour, waskani gijigo gindigo jau kanoji na dodam, apoganisna na dunjabwa shunian da. So I'm Lana. I'm speaking to you all from the shores of Gichigami, Lake Superior, in my traditional territory as a Anishinaabe Kwe. And right on my title slide, you'll see This is actually part of my dissertation from over a decade now. So although we've made some progress, still moving fairly slowly in terms of the way that we conceptualize and think about a thesis or a dissertation. So just I'll share a little bit about my story and a bit about stories of some students that I've had the privilege to work with. So for my own dissertation, I utilized beading as a methodology. It was also my theoretical framework and a mode of knowledge mobilization. So when it came time for my thesis defense, I had a large piece of hide and I told stories and interwove stories with my understandings that I learned from my dissertation that were attached to particular objects as well as to different pieces that I beaded. So my dissertation was about a character referred to as Turtle Woman. So all of these pieces of beadwork were laid on this turtle and then kind of moved over to the side. So in terms of my own experience, when it came to do my actual defense, there was some significant challenges, even in terms of time limitations. So it takes much longer to tell a story, to also speak the bit I could speak in the language and translate. And so those are some of the considerations. And not just with myself, but I often see this with other Anishinaabe students. They're looking for something that is right for them in terms of their methodology, and it doesn't always fit. So a lot of Anishinaabe students do the additional work of actually creating their own methodological processes. I had one master student finishing up her PhD now, about to begin a tenure track position. And she did such a good job at really thinking about visiting, for example, in the context of the Métis Nation. So I won't spend too much time here, but just wanted to remind people of our commitment at AU that we've made to Indigenous learners. And one thing I will note about this is that often we use metrics or measures like number of Indigenous students or things like that. But we have to remember Anishinaabe students are often very resilient and they will find a way to break down the barriers, to come through the doors, to be within university. And that has nothing to do with us. So when we think about our commitment, we actually have to be having the discussion within our programs, within our institutions. What are we doing? What are specific conversations and subsequent mechanisms that we are putting in place, particularly to build environments that are attractive and at a bare minimum, nonviolent to Anishinaabe students. So I said I was going to share a couple of stories. One is really thinking about experience as knowledge. So one master's student that I worked with, Anishinaabe student, had done years of community work, grassroots organizing, was really key, instrumental in mobilizing people in the community when Anishinaabe people were experiencing a lot of violence, not just within the broader community, but also police violence as well. And so she was pursuing a master's in social justice. And with permission from the people who'd shared their stories, she put together an exhibit that was created all with land-based art. So she sustainably harvested all of the materials from the land and told these stories. So there was a couple of things that came up here, and this was actually through there was a creative project stream in the project, and it still required a written component. Well, in the end, she ended up fulfilling the requirements of the thesis component, the research project. She did this amazing work. And so we had a lot of conversations in that program at the time of, okay, this is a creative project, which is also a research project, and that wasn't really acknowledged. Also thinking about where she actually was going to have her exhibit. So me and her, we ended up in the bush we cut down trees, and we built a teaching lodge, a pretty big teaching lodge, to house all of the beautiful pieces that she had created to do this storytelling. And we also needed to have a sacred fire as well as part of it. And then here's just one more example, and these have much more nuances and depth to them, but just in the time frame, I'm just giving kind of a quick look into some possibilities. So a Anishinaabe PhD student looking at healthcare leadership, and her whole project was embedded within ceremony. So in terms of what that looked like, she worked with a very well-respected knowledge keeper, had to do preparation according to the knowledge keeper, the lodge holder, and prepared for a ceremony. And she brought her questions to the ceremony and asked that spirit within that lodge for the answers. And that was the basis. So when thinking about, someone had mentioned rigor, and we were thinking, how do we implement that within ceremony? We obviously know, right? Rigor is in all the preparation, the knowledge holder, obviously is in a condition to ensure that there is rigor in place. But our systems aren't really equipped to deal with spiritual forms of knowledge, not just social. So I myself attended the ceremony just as an additional person, and then to actually engage in some follow-up conversations and reflection on the ceremony. But even when we got to the research ethics application as well, and thinking about that. And so they'd wanted to put the lodge keeper as the participant, but they were the conduit. They weren't the participant. And again, the Research Ethics Board isn't equipped, and the policy framework isn't equipped to deal with relationships beyond the human to the human. So there was definitely a lot of barriers that was encountered within this PhD dissertation as well. So just some considerations, some things to think about. What assumptions are made about valid knowledge? So thinking about number of participants, I've had students who have worked with one elder and have gotten criticism because of, right, they aren't speaking to a larger body of people. However, that elder is recognized and has all of those touch points and relationships within the community. The understanding that there must be a research participant. However, in the case of ceremony, there was no obvious research participant in that instance. That research might be more valid than experience, right? So we were able to get a waiver for the student who relied on their own experience, but years of relationship development and showing up in community, developing trust, right? So ingrained in ethics in a way that a consent form and interviews just doesn't have the capacity to do. And that the idea that contributions must be unique as well. So one of the other things that I've done working with students, with non-Anishinaabe students, is they've worked on projects as learning experience, but have engaged in their own critical autoethnographies about their positionality in relation to the project. And so that's a much more responsible way than the way the system is usually currently set up. You're a non-Anishinaabe person, you're learning research, this might be your first go, you might be new to a community. And right off the bat, we're teaching them a lack of humility. Go ahead, lead this project. So actually approaching it more responsibly, that should be acknowledged and lifted up instead of seen as perhaps lesser than. Thinking about institutional capacity, someone had mentioned committee members, ensuring that there's committee members with the capabilities, the competencies to serve, that have the nuanced understanding. In some of those instances, the need for additional spaces like cultural spaces, and then thinking about the procedures and are they equitable? So I'd mentioned even in my own example, right? If there's timelines in terms of limits in terms of a defense, or even the workload. So students who are often, especially if you're racialized or you're Anishinaabe, and you're doing something that's considered quote unquote unconventional. So often there's a lot of extra work that goes in to try to mitigate, epistemological racism and all of these other things that come into play. And also linkages between AU as well as external bodies and policies. So indexing theses, there's a difference that the prior university I was at, if it's a project versus a thesis. If it's a thesis, it's mandatory. And then there could be a whole bunch of new considerations that bubble up regarding ownership, control, access, and possession. And if that actually can even be indexed. Journal REB requirements. So if they're going to publish in some way, shape, or form, we got the REB waiver for one student in case they needed that for publication, and even thinking about future admissions. So for the one student who put so much work in, and then it was labeled as a creative project. And how is that going to be interpreted perhaps when they try to apply for a PhD program? So maybe I'll just leave it there, but happy to go into more detail on any of the stories shared, and I have some additional ones as well. Miigwech.
Thank you very much, Lana, for reminding us the type of transformation that we have to make to be able really to engage and create an inclusive environment for research at Athabasca University. Let's call the next speaker is Wayne. Wayne, the floor is yours. I will say that Wayne is a graduate of AU.
That I am. It's a pleasure to be back today, and nice to see everybody. So I'm going to speak about multimodal theses and dissertations, maybe from a little bit of a different perspective, with some Inuit research. There's been a lot of influence from our elders who have often spoken to us in Inuktitut, where these records or this data is available inside of the in the records in these dissertations and theses, but we have had some challenges getting that through. So what I did, in my day, this was 5 years ago, I used translation, and so had like Roman orthography and Inuit syllabics. But having like a full chapter on Inuit syllabics is definitely possible, and it has been done. And when we can now think about having recordings, whether those are video or the like, in our multimodal documents, then I think this brings more opportunity for conveying the right message and not having those misinterpreted. I think it's also important for the scholar to, it keeps them actually a little more accountable as well. But where I'm struggling currently is how to incorporate Unikaktaginik, which is storytelling, into say a mixed methods methodology for clinical trials, because clinical trials does not necessarily uphold Indigenous knowledge at this point. So what we've been working on in the Accelerating Clinical Trials Consortium, which is a Canadian study that's a network of trialists across the country. And we've added Indigenous to help advance clinical trial practices that will increase Canadians' access to trials. So that includes Indigenous populations. And what I found from the beginning was there was a desire to make trials more safe, and certainly we need to do that. And maybe that's indigenizing trials to some extent. But then we had a group of elders who led us, the grandmothers, and they actually said to us, we actually want to incorporate our methods into trial design, so inclusive of storytelling and other approaches to knowledge sharing. But that this also involved the interpretation of that data. So we'd still have a control group or some other clinical approach to sort of, I guess, qualify it as a clinical trial. And I should back up to say we've made amazing leaps when it comes to Indigenous health research. These have been done, using PAR or some other community-led methodology, and those have been contained in the community mostly. So if we start looking at health systems and how that scientific research is conducted, and especially if it's regarding a pharmaceutical or something like that, this is where we can maybe see some challenges in the way that some of those studies have been conducted to date, and maybe with non-Indigenous research methods. So incorporating storytelling and multimodal ways of sharing information, not only throughout the study, but as products, whether that's through knowledge translation or in dissertations. This gives us really an opportunity to demonstrate how does this actually work. The best way that I've been able to explain it to Western scientists is that it's like doing a mixed methods approach with a focus group that looks at the patient's experience alongside the control group. Full stop, that makes a lot of sense. But the elders said to us, no, that's not what it is. We are using our traditional practices the way we know them and how we want to be seen and understood. And this was very important in a mental health clinical trial, which I'm conducting. And then getting some of these through, like previous speakers speaking about ethics review processes, like this was, I wouldn't say controversial, but just not understood. So it takes a considerable amount of time if this is something that you want to do, or you have to work at that phase of your study in order to get started. Another thing that I will talk about is how we've been able to use multimodal, kinds of approaches, whether that's in the study process, or whether that's like knowledge, sharing, seeking, and also like knowledge translation after the study completes. And so these are also byproducts of the study that can be included in your dissertation. So if I was thinking about like, a written dissertation that included some of these products, this is something that would be quite helpful, and is in fact something that we're working on. So we are currently looking at like mental health assessment tools that include KSADS, PHQ-9, DASQ, and Mini-MoCA. So those are like some of the mainstay mental health assessments, but KSADS is the one we're looking at specifically, in PHQ-9. And what we've learned was, so when we started doing this study, we thought, well, let's translate all of this, and then we can see if this still makes sense. And what we learned is it didn't make sense, because these are Western tools, and they're conventional, and they need to be used for upholding clinical guidelines and regulation, et cetera. So then how can we make these more consumable to patients, Inuit patients? And then the idea of using a multimodal approach to knowledge translation, but also how these tools could be conveyed to the patients and families so it was understood. And that included an elder providing some support for the patient and describing what it was that what it is that the care provider is wanting to ask and why it's important. Because some of the language that's used in these scales don't make sense. And when it's included with Inuktitut reference points and elders who are supporting the use of these tools, those became more important. And we started looking at them as fact sheets, but then realized using a video would make they'd be even more powerful. So this is work that's happened at Johns Hopkins, where I'm having an opportunity to learn from them and think about how we can do this in Canada. So those are the main things that I wanted to talk about, and I can't believe 10 minutes has gone by so quickly. But thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you today, and it was really a pleasure to come back to the AU.
Thank you very much, Wayne. I think that what we can take from your presentation is that if we want to be relevant to everyone, we need to be adopting inclusive research approach. Okay, thank you. And we will move to the next on our list is Lori. Lori, the floor is yours. Is Lori there?
Hello, Lori.
Okay. I think we can move to the next on the list is Margaret. At least I can see that you are around. So.
Hi, everyone. Okay, I will just share my screen. Hey, well, I'm pretty excited to be in such esteemed company today. Hi, everyone. I'm Margaret Rollick. I defended my dissertation on December 17th, 2024. And I believe it was the first multimodal dissertation at Athabasca University. My research took critical autoethnography into digital space, as Dr. Coleman did. She was examining art in digital spaces. My focus was on nursing history and nursing education and expressing my knowledge in digital spaces. But before I move forward, I will say that I'm privileged to live my life on the unceded ancestral lands of the Lekwungen-speaking people, the Esquimalt and Songhees First Nations. I'm thankful for the people who hold the stories of the land, the moving tides, the ones who swim, fly, and otherwise travel in or on land, water, or air. And I'm thankful when the air is clear of smoke and the climate is temperate. I remind myself that we are all treaty people, even when there's no treaty. So what was I trying to do in my multimodal digital dissertation? The first thing was respond to Canada's Truth and Reconciliation Commission of Canada's calls to action in a meaningful way. The second was to advance excellence in online advanced nursing education. And the final thing was to disrupt the dissertation into the 21st century, opening space for e-portfolio assessment of doctoral dissertation work with the goal of advancing e-portfolios as the doctoral product. As the developer of my digital e-portfolio workspace, this is what the space looked like. with the toolbar at the top from where I could control the design, the pages, the files, the text, the font, and various gizmos to add videos, images, and links. Because once the work is released into the wild, which has in fact happened today, I have my dissertation now uploaded in the thesis and can add a link after I finish presenting if folks are interested. So because I'll have no control once it's released in the world, I have provided trigger warnings here at the beginning of the work and before other comment or content where the visitor may find interacting with the work upsetting or unsettling. To complete the ePortfolio dissertation, I used Foliotech, which is a digital ePortfolio platform that allows me to move beyond the medieval tome that Dr. Farley was referring to earlier into the 21st century, bringing in music, audio, video, images, and stories from history that I present in my critical digital nurseography. Here, an exploration of the past serves as an explicit reminder of how the power of patriarchy and white supremacy, combined with personal and professional self-interest, can cause harm, offering a leaping off point for the visitors and my own personal reflections on nursing education and practice now and into the future. So in this way, it's a living document, it's living pedagogy. I've invited the visitor into my own experience of looking at the past of Canada and imagining new ways forward. So this slide provides an overview of how I approach the work from a theoretical perspective. So I've used critical ePortfolio andragogy, self-directed, self-determined adult learning in mobile spaces. I've brought in critical autoethnography, where I'm examining gender, race, class, power in the context of my own history, nursing, and white European Christian colonialism. And I do that using a multimodal digital platform. And it's wrapped in a method of nursing inquiry called relational inquiry that builds on the work of Gwen Hartrick-Doan and Colleen Varco. So thinking of supports and challenges, the biggest piece was time. It was probably 2 years and a cross-country move that allowed the space for time to pass between my first raising the idea to Deborah and getting approved to actually propose the digital dissertation. When we got to the point of the dissertation being ready to go forward to my committee, my committee wasn't really sure how to assess it. As Tom mentioned earlier, the affordances of a digital dissertation are many, but the assessment can be challenging. And while I did provide some guidance within the work itself, I'm quite certain that my assessors would have appreciated a nice checklist, perhaps that they could have had. But on the other side, critical autoethnography does defy checklists and a rigid assessment process. Now, people, too many to count, from my supervisor and committee to my beta readers, administrative support. I know Deanna was here. Having someone within Faculty of Grad Studies who has been really championing the work from from my perspective as a student, she has been my first point. I know there's very many other people who have been integral to this as well. But having the champions there has been critical. Yes. And back to the assessment, when everyone knows what a monograph looks like, and nobody really knows what an e-portfolio dissertation looks like, there's a lot of people taking a leap of faith supporting the process. And as others have talked about, and I mentioned earlier, change takes time. And I was in the unique position of being able to take that time to allow those processes to happen. The next person who does a digital multimodal dissertation will not have those same challenges because we have many of those processes in place. Now within the ethics application, for example, there are questions about using digital resources. With supporting 2D thesis, we now have a template that people who are using alternative modes for their dissertation can use in order to submit. Yeah, so Tom really spoke to a number of issues around supporting students, as has Deborah and Kate. So I don't think I will add much more to that. And leave things for questions later. And I will pass the chair on to Rima. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Margaret. Indeed, Margaret was our first student really to complete a multimodal thesis. And as she told you, we have gone through several challenges, even at the level of the faculty of graduate study, to be able to actually offer the support that is necessary for this type of work. But trust me, we are working hard and we are ready to support other students. So thank you, Margaret. We move to Rima.
Thank you so much. Wow. Being the last speaker is really exciting because then I can, I feel I can sum up a lot of the ideas, and a lot of them are present in what I'm going to talk about. The first thing that I want to start with is a big thank you for this opportunity. I haven't talked about my dissertation a lot lately, except when I was talking with my students, graduate students in the research course. And I was really faced by some of their questions, with simple questions like, can I use I when I'm talking, when I'm writing in my dissertation, or things very simple like, can I include my art? Like they felt that they needed to separate themselves from their artistic identity, or things like this. And this brings me to the title of our meeting today. And when I read it, I was like, wow, what a great title, like meeting the need of our time. And here I want to leave us with the question, what is the need of our time? While I walk us a little bit through my experience as a doctoral student at Athabasca University, when I do not come from any specific culture within Canada, of course, but I come from a culture from the Middle East. I have my own approach to research, and I wanted to do something that allows me to include my entire identity, my entire self into my academic work. Of course, I'm not going to talk about all of it, but I'm going to talk about three big sections, and that is the spark, where curiosity begins, the passage where thoughts take form, and the tapestry where threads become meaning. For those who are familiar, of course, you are going to realize that I'm going to talk about my dissertation tapestry, which was entitled ENVT and Deeper Learning, Orthographic Tapestry of Narratives in Asynchronous Discussions. I want to note here that the word tapestry is used in both the metaphorical and the literal sense because I actually wove a dissertation tapestry. My entire dissertation is right here in this actual tapestry that people had the opportunities to touch. Where did this spark from? And that is the spark of curiosity, where curiosity begins. And this is where we come back to the rigor. Actually, it sparked for me from the literature. So I sat with the literature and I read the literature and I knew from a multilingual person. I speak three languages. I know that words are limited and limiting. Right now, as I work with large language models, I know that words can be expressed through an AI as well. But there's more to who we are as human beings. There's the nonverbal component. And I was researching it and I sat with this quote, which compared the nonverbal component within communication to strands in a tapestry that is interwoven with the verbal to create a holistic meaning, not understanding what it means, because I don't know what a tapestry involves. I started I was curious to know what it involved. And this is when I came across a video on YouTube that showed a person weaving a tapestry, and I was super, super curious about it. Here is what like the role of the supervisor, and not because Deborah is here, but I really want to say that I sat with this idea for several months, not daring, like not having the courage to reach out to my supervisor because of that notion that it needs to be very academic. When I was thinking, I want to weave a tapestry for my dissertation. So I was like, oh, I need to be very, very sure about it before I approach my supervisor. And when I did, she was more excited than I was. And I told her something. I was like, what if it is a total failure? And you know what she said to me? And this struck a very important chord with me that I say to my students right now, who are instructors as well. She said, that's on both of us. So not only she accepted the risk that I would take, she accepted the risk that she will take. And that is a takeaway, I think, for all of us supervising graduate students at this point. So once we both agreed that I am going to approach this dissertation as a researcher weaver and deeper learner, I think we were both open to exploring what this means and and discovering this together. Because of its newness, there's no point of reference. We cannot go to anything that was done like that before and say we are going to do it not knowing what I was doing. I went through the process. I let the process lead me until I discovered later on that I used orthography as my methodology. And using orthography as my methodology, this was brought up to me by one of my committee. Hence comes the importance of committee members who are who complement this exploration and choosing the right committee members, of course. But this allowed me to bring my entire identity as an artist, researcher, and teacher into this academic work. And by doing so, I naturally gravitated into orthography, where I expressed everything that my discoveries through art, through my tapestry, of course, and through the graphy. And the graphy is not only the writing of my dissertation, is also the poetry that I included in it. So here we come to the passage. And when I talk about the passage, oh my gosh, I thought I was really moving through my that's very interesting. Now I noticed that I did not move through my slides because I was super excited about it. But now I noticed that I wanted to show you a little bit of the process. So, inspired by my experience of learning how to weave, I taught myself how to warp a loom. And this inspired my process, which is the passage where thoughts take form. And when I talk about the passage, I talk about the passage of time and the passage of the threads as well. So here, by learning how to warp the loom, as you can see, this inspired my process of conducting the research. So it wasn't linear. I know I had stages, and I kept going back to those stages as needed. For example, for data gathering, like I had multiple data gathering, so it was more like moving in loops in that respect as well. Also, when these take form, I'm going to show you that once I worked the loom and I invited the participants and I worked with my participants to collect their stories, I discovered that I was probably too ambitious to think that I can weave without a design. So I created the design digitally. Here is where the digital and the physical meet. And then I sat at the loom learning how to tie raya knots. I considered, of course, when I heard the stories and the narratives of the participants and my own stories, I assigned colors for these. And I thought that separate, they are just like this fringe. And once I start interweaving them, they are going to take a whole different meaning. So this inspired the meaning of my entire tapestry, of course. And moving from there, this is also where the thoughts take form. I started inventing processes like I know that when we're doing narrative research was included in the graphy part of my research. But when we do narrative research, we talk about story hearing and storytelling. But I invented the art of story weaving as well. So I would put these headphones on my head, listen to the stories, and weave at the same time. While I'm doing that, I also engaged in journaling and storying and restorying and doing all the process. So I did all the process of conducting a research by adding the other part to it, which is the weaving. So I did the coding and I coded visually through the weaving, tangibly through the weaving, and also through the words. So this involved a lot of processes for me. And of course, this is where the threads become meaning. And I'm going to just like give you a little bit of of an idea of this is not the entire tapestry. This is the unfinished tapestry because after I completed the parts that I thought I will complete, I continued to weave. I continued to weave little pieces that I cut later on and I gave to the people who really walked this journey with me. Uh, I thought that this is a way of remaining connected physically as well as in the digital world, although it was all done digitally. That's just like a very big highlight into, like as I said, three big parts of this journey. What were the biggest challenges that I faced? The newness. I'm doing something totally new. I don't know if it's going to be a total failure. I was super afraid when I was doing it. I cried a lot. I doubted myself a lot. I was like, who in the world takes up such a big tapestry when they do not know how to weave? Taking the risk and accepting that risk, of course, with the encouragement of my committee, and it turned out to be an acceptable tapestry. Of course, if a professional weaver looks at it, they will think that it's a total disaster. But accepting that risk while thinking of the rigor of the research. So, what did rigor look like for me? Rigor for me was about authenticity. It was about the reflexivity. It was about being relying on multiple knowledge systems, and it was about keeping in mind that this is not only for me. So Margaret said something that really resonated with me, which is like once we do it, once we are the first people who chart that path, like others can follow and probably take it from there. But what I was thinking about is the the dissemination of this type of research. Who is it going to help? It's going to help multiple people, actually. There was a time when I was presenting at a conference, and the people who did not speak English were able to understand what I was talking about because it was very accessible for them. When I was reading this part right here, You will look at it and you will see the face and probably something going there. Of course, everything has a meaning in my dissertation. I explained some of it, but the other part of it is for you to interpret it, to see a reflection of yourself in it. So when my son, who is neurodivergent, and I'm very, very proud of him, he's on the spectrum, when he saw me weaving this part, he came to me and said, "Oh, mom, you just wove a heart." I said, "Where do you see the heart?" I said, "It's right here." And and this helped me understand that how people see themselves in this work beyond what's written in words. Another person looked at this part, which actually represents deeper learning that happens through time and the passage of time. Something totally different. And I was very proud of how people engage with the work beyond the work that's expressed through words. And this is where I'm going to go back to everybody and say, what do we think the need of our time is when we're talking about dissertations in the age of AI, in the age of words, the mix and match and salad of words that is generated through algorithms? And in the age of having very much limitation, many limitations through the words. And with this, I thank you so much for listening and for giving me the opportunity to talk about my dissertation.
Wow, thank you very much. This is very, very creative work. It's blown my mind, Rima.
Simon, we might have someone who shows up again. It's
Lori, is Lori in?
Lori.
Yes, I am.
Okay, good, Lori.
Perfect.
Laurie Thompson, where are you? Apart from
I
at Tim
am
Hortons.
I am actually in the deep of northern Alberta doing research. And
Okay,
what an incredible opportunity to even take a look at multimodal and alternative dissertations, because what I wanted to talk about was, for me, the multimodal approach uh, provided the signage I needed to keep going. You know, just like our time up here in the north and finding our pathways, I was so lost before I entered into the stream of multimodal dissertations. And even going into the communities, like I'm doing my research on the Métis settlements of Alberta, and, you know, they don't know the words dissertation. You know, so I come in and I'll tell them Tanse Kakiawiaka, Lori Thompson, Nasiga soon, Kikino Métis settlement of Sinio. So I greet them in our traditional language. I identify my homelands, and then I come up with a word. I'm doing research. Bad word. It's not a welcome word. Dissertation, they don't know what that means. And so as I embarked and discovered and recognized that the landscape of graduate research is evolving because of the hard work like Wayne Clark. I was so excited to see him here today. Joyce Helmer. I didn't know those existed. I didn't know there were other people who had signposts for me along the way in this journey. And so, what I wanted to talk about today was how adopting a multimodal approach really helped me define Indigenous research, a Métis methodology. And I did it by connecting what I knew about a fishing net, the fishing net that we drop into the water that feeds us. And I started drawing connections to understanding what I knew as an Indigenous person and how that came alongside Euro Western ways. And at the beginning of my journey, if somebody would have told me I was an activist, I would have left. I don't like chaos. I don't like things that I don't understand. And yes, Dr. Hoven, the work that I stumbled upon, you know, with some of previous dissertations that I saw from Indigenous people brought me back because I was ready to quit. I was quitting. I was not doing it anymore. I had no place. There was no place for me there. And the multimodal dissertation allowed me to get back on my feet as an Indigenous person and go back into the Indigenous communities for whom I wanted to do the research with the words, with the communication that was dynamic and it was engaging. And so for me, the multimodal dissertation really became about the preservation, the protection, and the access of the knowledge I was asking elders to share with me. And it hasn't been an easy journey. It's been challenging. It's been fraught with barriers. And some of those barriers came from the university. For me, ethics is interwoven in everything I do from the time I open my eyes till I go to bed. And I started my research way before I got ethics approval because I needed the approval of the communities. I needed the guidance of our elders to walk with me. And from a Euro-Western lens, I was starting research without an REB. Couldn't understand why this was this way. And I don't like jumping through hoops. I never have. I've not principled a school as long as I have by completely following the rules. And I'm sure some of you are cringing listening to me say that. But whose rules? Whose rigor? Whose ethics? And I had to go with the people that I was asking to share this knowledge. And so when we talk about preservation, I've come to understand that as the rigor, because I have to have the knowledge, I have to have the research, I have to have the background to support the rigor. And I have to answer to the people of the Métis settlements first, and they will tell me, they will question rigor before the university will. So I really feel that the multimodal approach encompasses rigor hand in hand with ethics. And to me, ethics is about the protection. So rigor is the preservation, but ethics is the protection. It's the recognition of the knowledge that flows differently, that flows not only from the land, but from people's memories, from stories, from pathways. When people would take me out on the land to show me landmarkers, it's about the uh the the in some cases I have people coming with their story, but it was a consent that they had from the supervisor to hunt 20 muskrats. And multimodal makes room for that. It welcomes knowledge in a different way than the monolithic bound paper with just words. It brings the life essence of the people that we're asking to do this research with. I also feel that the multimodal really is about accessibility. And we talk about accessibility in my relationship with Dr. Hoven begins there because it's bound in relational trust. We talk about that relational tie. It is the ontology, the absolute value of kinship, Wakotoin, that is encompassed in the multimodal approach. I'm working on my dissertation, as we speak, sitting in a parking lot waiting to meet with another elder. And what I have come to appreciate about the multimodal approach is it brings joy and laughter in knowledge. And that's lost in a dissertation that's bound. It brings the creativity of the story. If you've ever listened to Indigenous people tell a story, they're always laughing. So you always wonder what the secret is. What are they talking about? And so it's the joy, the laughter, it's pictures, it's the landmarks, it's the artifacts that encompass the story. the story that's bound in that, and the knowledge that comes with it. The multimodal approach also, most importantly for us as Indigenous people, allows for accessibility we've never seen before. Nobody's going to go into AU's archives to look for my dissertation. They're not going to do that. But if we put the pictures, if we put the language, those things are going to be visible in the homes. The evidence of that preservation, that protection of what we hold most valuable is us as people. And the multimodal approach brings the people along on the journey like it should, and as all research should. I also found that the multimodal approach, I've lost my language. I understand more than I could speak of the Cree language. And where that language barrier was there, the multimodal approach bridged it. It bridged it so they could show me the knowledge that they wanted. They could hand me that knowledge when they handed me an old creamer that was used to make butter, you know, even as much as 20 years ago. And so the language that comes from a multimodal approach bridges English in a way that allows the people of the Indigenous communities to continue on with their research or in a way that has never, ever been seen before. I also
Oh, it looks like we have a connection problem.
Yeah, Laurie, not sure if you can hear us, but we lost you. Perhaps, Simo, we should probably take a break at this point, even to give Laurie a time to reconnect if possible, and then and see what's next.
So should we resume at 40?
Yeah.
Okay,
People have,
so 3:40.
Yeah,
at 3:40.
Laurie is up in transit in northern communities. The connectivity is not very good up there.
Yeah, and I'm very grateful we're able to hear her. And I think she left on a good note with bringing the joy, the laughter, and people along. So that was a beautiful way as well to end, if nothing else. So we'll see everybody at 3:40, just to give a time to stretch a little bit, and then come back and have a brother discussion with all the panelists. See you at 3:40.
Thank you. Okay, thank you very much for staying with us until now. Before we continue, I would just like to remind that AU at this moment accept 3 types of thesis. The traditional monograph is one of them, and thesis by article, and then multimodal thesis, because some people have heard some question regarding whether we are trying to promote multimodal thesis because it's the way of the future. Yes, it is, but it does not mean that the other traditional form of thesis are going to disappear. Okay, we open the floor now for questions. Mina.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for such amazing presentations. I was riveted. It was fantastic. I just wanted to, I should contextualize myself before asking this question. I'm a settler immigrant in Canada, but I'm also a beneficiary of the caste and class structures. And my question is from that lens. So I understand that with multimodal work, the heart of that lies in autoethnography to quite an extent. And it is that practice that I have a question about. So I'm a political economist who has been doing this cut and dried political economy publication for a while. But recently, I have been using creative means to kind of synthesize and make the very complex processes and concepts of political economy more accessible to students, to lay people, and so on. So I'm a champion of multimodal from that perspective. I use autoethnography in that because I find that as a very, shouldn't use the word, but the most convenient mode from my perspective, because I can tell my story and I don't have to gain permission. But at the same time, I also have a question about the critique of autoethnography, because I'm very conscious of that. The critique of autoethnography is often about subjectivity, hyper individualization, and so on. And I can, as someone who was also trained in history, I can see that those critiques are easy to answer because history is subjective. All accounts are to an extent subjective. What I'm noticing is that in cultures that are collectivist oriented, such as indigenous cultures, that hyper individualization doesn't happen because there is that collectivist orientation to your conditioning and to the research space and to the question you bring and to the to your object of inquiry or objects of inquiry, which are not people but questions. But I'm also noticing that it's also being used as in more individualized or people who have more individualistic orientation. They use it to prop themselves up very effectively using this tool, which is not meant to do so. So I have not come across anything that kind of, addresses that contradiction. So, but I just thought this is such a learned gathering and you have all done such amazing work related to multimodality. I was just wondering if you had anything to say about that possibility that I do see emerging. And I include myself in that. I feel that, like it has been said a few times, even in the chat, multiliteracies. This requires multiliteracies, but is it not then creating another kind of hierarchy? Because I personally feel that way as well. It holds me back from using it because I feel I'm taking up space because I have the advantage of these multiliteracies. So I'm kind of throwing it out there as a question. I'm sorry if it's too raw and not very well formed. It's for anyone who would care to answer.
Okay. Thank you,
Amy.
Mina.
Is it Kate? Kate, sorry. I think you've shown a few things in the chat, but it would be great to hear from you as well.
Very happy to. So, Professors Dan Harris and Stacey Holman-Jones here in Melbourne have been doing a lot of work around the critique of critical autoethnography. And so for me, it is always big C critical, it's intersectional, but that is a move away from an autoethnography that has been, I think, as you say, rightly, used by people inappropriately because they're not actually they're not moving away into the ontoethical epistemological kind of work. And so this is always the case with any methodology, though. You know, methodologies can be colonized even though we might profess to be decolonizers. And this is why the work matters. You know, the question of why this matters right now is because if we are actually going to try and open up the academy and suggest that there is some kind of equity and care in a harsh environment like higher education, then we need to actually do the work. And the work is that it has to be methopedagogic, it has to be teaching, it has to be responsible. And, you know, to use Dan and Stacey's words, critical autoethnography and anyone working in the relational space of humans and more than humans and non-humans at this moment is always doing research. And, you know, they say it beautifully. They have a great book called Queering Autoethnography. The introduction is, this is never me search, this is research, that is we search. And it's just a beautiful, easy line right at the front of that book that locates that, you know, if we are doing intersectional work, it's never about the self. It's always the self in relation. And that's a shift in understanding. But that's why this work needs to be pedagogical, because people don't have those literacies. The colonizing world have made them inaccessible. And the only reason that those theses continue to exist in that format is because they are only made for a certain few. So if you're actually doing justice-oriented work that actually shifts the audience, shifts the knowledge space, then you have to be responsive to that.
Thank you so much for that.
Thank you, Kate. Deborah?
Yeah, I am, you know, I'm a retired person, so I have lots of time to think and participate in things like this. Okay, so in addition to what Kate has just contributed, I've been working with collaborative autoethnography for quite a few years now, and I've been exploring the possibilities extended into the, as you mentioned, Kate, and as the Indigenous people who are in this space also would be thinking about, and that's collaborative with the non-human components of the world. I'm not going to say our world, but I think there's a great space to take the autoethnographic aspect of multimodality into a different arena and expand it further. It may be a bit woo at the moment, but for a lot of us who have grown up with a very ecologically grounded culture, then it seems like a logical extension of where we're trying to go. So I'll just leave it at that and open to other people. Sorry.
Thank you, Deborah. Corinne, do you have a question? Can you find question from the chat?
I think there was a question around, it was Gail who had mentioned her example. Gail, I don't know if you're here. You had mentioned an example, even in the MBA, and I was very kind of like struck by this because we've been touching a lot on the, you know, some of the humanities and social sciences, and then we don't always think about business and in terms of disciplines in that realm. And she was using this example of using a fable. It was one of her assignment, and she was basically challenging how could we expose, I guess, students, you know, in master's degree, regardless, I'm guessing, of the program, to do some aspect of multimodal research. And maybe that's a question, I don't know, for supervisors and faculty in general. You know, how could we go about exposing students, you know, in the program that is always so full of constraints? So I don't know if you have experience that you could share in that regard. Deborah.
Yeah, go ahead, Deborah.
You're a
I'm
pioneer
sorry, I could chime in, and I think Tom has raised his hand also.
as
I mean,
well.
ask students. I mean, ask students. Get students talking cross-disciplinarily. I mean, for me, it's a no-brainer. But I mean, I've crossed so many disciplines in my immodest career that I think it's a no-brainer. But I see Laurie also after Tom. Sorry to usurp your position, Corinne.
Not at all.
Yeah, no,
Laurie?
yeah, I don't think it really matters as much about the discipline. It's just about that willingness. The only thing, and maybe I'm being a little bit unduly pessimistic, in that just as I see that we have dipped our toes and maybe up to our ankles at this stage in multimodal assessment, I do fear some of the talk around Gen AI is leading to some degree of retrenchment against novel or different assessment strategies. Now, I'd be the first to advocate that multimodal is actually is a great tool, but I just sort of see a sense that, and not just in Ireland, but just generally around, I think there's some sort of retrenchment. So just a little bit. Sorry to sound a sort of a cautionary note. I think Laurie was next.
You want real talk. Laurie, please go ahead.
Thank you. One of the things that I wish I had known at the beginning of my journey that I do now is having that initial exposure, like from the very beginning of multimodal. So we would spend a lot of our time having to prep 20-minute presentations, but it was just slides and talking. So we weren't really presented the opportunity to delve into that creativity that multimodal can bring. The other thing that I wish I had known then was I just did a 3-minute thesis, and I did. I'm for principle. I'm curious. I wanted to see what AI would give me. Oh, it gave me a picture, and I went and showed it to my dad, and my dad's like, throw that in the garbage. The simplicity of multimodal and the creativity that can come from it. Uh, AI, I believe in what I see right now, does not understand the humanness. It can only take from what it knows on the internet to generate something. And when we go back to the question of who is the research for, you must continue to go back to ask that. And even as far as the auto ethnography, I've thought about that because many of our elders will talk about knowledge found in what English would call a noun, a tree, a rock, the sun. This for us, the sun is the ultimate in the creator. It gives life to everything. In and of itself, the knowledge attained from that. That's not a me. That is not even a we. That is beyond us. And there's still a lot of work to be done in terms of how that is defined in academia, and having the people in the positions to sit on REBs and to guide even practicing advisors who are willing to learn and want to learn. And so our advisors shouldn't be seen as the be all end all. And Dr. Hoven has always made that clear, that we must seek out beyond that. And the mentorship that happened between us went both ways equally, where we were seeking out the other knowledge that assists with that. And so I really have to um, pull both of those questions together, and those conversations that were encouraged in the early years of our doctoral work from the beginning have to ask those deep questions that really aren't found in the literature per se yet. They're just still beginning to happen. And it's those type of conversations that can lead to the multimodal and alternative dissertations. But those must come in the conversations and then in those small assignments as we progress through.
Thank you, Laurie. I take the note for the initial exposure. So this is something I think at the FGS level we can certainly think about. It's going to be Margaret. If you don't mind, Kate, it's going to go to Rima and then to you. So Margaret first.
Thank you. I'm just going back to Mino's question, and the idea of the self being central to autoethnography, yet the work not really being about me. Although there are pieces, very intimate pieces of me in the work, it's not about me. And so that irony, that paradox of taking space to make space for others in the world, and thinking about the false objectivity of Western science, and within autoethnography, within critical autoethnography, I'm very specific in speaking about my positionality and what brings me to the work, and how I have chosen the literature that I've looked at within my inquiry, where I have said that I have favored the work of my Indigenous colleagues. Because part of what I want to do is raise voices that aren't necessarily part of the mainstream conversation. And so being clear about the intention we bring, Murray Sinclair said it's the work of all Canadians to engage in reconciliation, and it's not the work of my Indigenous colleagues who to lead that in that the responsibility for the harm is mine. It is not theirs. And this work is mine to do, and my colleagues to do, with respect and in a good way, to advance right relationships. But I'll just stop at that.
Thank you, Margaret. That was powerful. Rima, and then Kate. We're going to close with you, Kate.
Okay, so what I really want to talk about is how we can encourage our students right now who are starting or who are on the path of writing a dissertation or a thesis to explore alternative ways, creative ways of doing a dissertation. I think of three things. The first one is first of all, allow them to express their passions. The first question that I ask in my research course is, who are you? What is your explore yourself, talk about yourself. What are your passions? Who are you? Explore your sense of being and your sense of becoming, and let's talk about that first. Why is this important? It's important because it is that line between generative and creative. So when we're talking about AI, it really, really bothers me when somebody says it's creative, because it's generative from what already exists. Whereas when it's creative, it comes from a sense of self and from a passion. So if we want them to go to that level of creativity, the first step for me, at least this is what I did when I was exploring my research, is to discover who I am as a person, who I am as a researcher, as an artist, who am I becoming as a researcher and as a research educator, and all of that. So explore a sense of self, model let's ask ourselves what type of dissertations, what types of research, what type of writing we are exposing them to, what type of scholars we are exposing them to. If I am not a creative scholar, probably I did my scholarly work like 100 years ago, and it wasn't like that. It wasn't acceptable to go creative. Can I pull some of the network that I have, allow them to have conversations with those students and tell them, well, there's so much out there that you can explore. I know people within my circle who did their dissertation through dance. They would dance in the forest and did their dissertation through art-based research like that. Look, let's expose them. Let's let them see some models and challenge them. Challenge them in the sense of like, yes, I know, but ask them the question, do you think you can do something different based on? And here I remember Dr. Hovind listening really very curiously to what I was saying and saying to me, well, you're talking about this a lot. What do you mean by it? And she would leave it for 2-3 weeks to come up with an answer. And the question would be, well, you're repeating the word deeper, 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 deeper learning. What does that mean? And what does it mean for you? Like these are the three things that I would say we can do with our students. Again, explore their passion, their sense of self, give them enough models that can inspire them and challenge them.
Thank you, Rima, for the beautiful sentences and a very creative process. Kate, the floor is yours for closing remarks as people are leaving, but it's on record, so people will have access to it.
Nice.
And I want to thank as well everybody else that participated so far.
I will do my quick thanks at the end too. I think that the meeting needs of our time needs to move away. I think we just landed back in binaries. And if we're going to actually start thinking about what it means to be multimodal, to be more than that, to be plurilingual and to be pluriversal, then we actually need to start thinking about co-creation, and we need to start working with more than human. And the version of centering the human self back in is so problematic for me. That, we've gone on this beautiful journey with 2 hours with each other, and then we return to what things can't be rather than how we think things can be or might be. I am only supervising AI co-creation right now. Of course, that's where the work went when we're working in pluriversal, plurilingual spaces. And so I just ask people, as we've gone to this, how you return to meeting the needs of our time. If we only return to the centering of the self, I think this is why we're in a grave political time. And if we don't actually start thinking about the more than human and the non-human and the justices that sit around those, that's the responsibility of the academy. Because otherwise it just continues to serve the few. And I just think that that is not going to make any of the things that we've talked about here possible. And then if we just stay in impossibility and return to Anna Craft's amazing work that she did before she died way too early, what does it actually mean to just stay in possibility thinking? And then what are those opportunities for us to think with large language models, to think with all of the intelligences that exist across our planet, then we might have an opportunity. But resisting the binary must be what it means to work in this moment of the world. And I think that we can land too easily back inside them because it gives us an answer when we're in uncertainty. And maybe we just need to hold on to the bit that we don't know. It's unsafe, but it's actually that risk, is beautiful.
Thank you, Kate, for advocating what you just said. And also, I want to remind everyone that some references have been put into the chat. So this is a chat that will be recorded and available, and we'll make sure that you know the link. So if you want to go back or even contact some of the panelists for some of the references, I will also post some of the references that Dr. Deborah Oven has very kindly provided prior to this presentation. And so that will be part of the message as well. So if any of the panelists want to send me any references that you want to make sure people have access to, please feel free to do so. Simon, the floor is yours to close.
It looked like Deborah wanted to say something.
I was just going to add to Kate's commentary and say that I think that risk is the way to go for our times. That was all. And also to please ask everyone to contribute any resources, all resources that you feel are relevant for our times. Thanks.
Yeah. Okay. I think that this is a very good, actually, conclusion from Kate and Deborah. I would like to ask all of us to give a big round of applause to our speaker this afternoon, really for the great job that they have done. Indeed, meeting the need of our time means that one of the things that is coming is the need. We are not talking about a need, we are talking about the need. It means that there are several, and we are several, and we have different type of need. Doing that inclusive research that, from what I heard today, it needs actually that we take multi-modal approach, multi-methodological approach, and different various framework to be able to come with something that can really help to answer the different questions that different groups can have. It is very important, and like I told you, for FGS, we are trying to make sure that we create an environment that can support this type of research, and is that why we call for this webinar today, and we will continue doing that to make sure that students and staff who are willing to support students to do this type of research will have the type of tools and support from us. So thank you again for coming. And I would like to say a special thank you to Deborah, because if we were able to put this webinar together is thanks to her commitment. You know that she is retired now, but actually, even when she is retired, she is among the people who support the most, who supervise the most thesis or dissertation at Athabasca at this moment. So she is always there. She is always working and supporting her student. A big news is that 4 of the panelists today were or are former students of Deborah. Okay, so this shows you how instrumental she has been for the promotion of multimodal thesis at Athabasca University. So special thank you, Deborah, and thank you to Kate as well, who is traveling to US, and I'm quite sure that she's under pressure now to go to the airport, but she has managed to make it this morning for us. So thank you, everyone, and next time. Thank you, and bye now.
Stop.